Hello, this is an overview of Jordan Peterson's recent book named 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Jordan Peterson is a Canadian clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Toronto. He was also in the past a professor at Harvard University. He has authored other books, one of them being Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, and has published videos from his university lectures on YouTube. He has had millions of views and has greater than 800 subscribers on a variety of topics. Jordan Peterson is an articulate, logical thinker and intellectual and can go very deep on subjects and themes. He is also very well read and references many works from Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, Jung, Solzhenitsyn, Freud, and others. So why did Jordan Peterson write the book? He wrote the book based on his experience with social media. And something that was surprising to him was that he answered the question, what are the most valuable things everyone should know, that was posted on Quora, and he experienced many likes and views. I think one of the top answers to all questions. And if you want to do a little more research on that, simply type that into a browser and you should get some relevant results. He also was contacted by a literary agent that saw him on a discussion on a CBC program. They exchanged emails and they came up with the concept of this book. He wanted to also take his experience primarily with order and chaos, and he uses that concept quite a bit in the book and how it fits into the concept of being, and he uses that as a capital B, but that's being as a person living in this life. The target audience for this book is for really anyone who's interested in self-help. There's a lot of great things to be taken from this book that can be applied in a very practical way. Second audience target would be people who are interested in developing a deeper understanding of human psychology. I think he does a great job of blending psychology with practical applications. And then I think the last target audience would be anybody who has heard of Dr. Peterson and may have become intrigued by his teaching. I certainly hit all three of these categories. So why should you read the book? I think it's to develop a better understanding of the key concepts that can help you get through life, and I think many of the rules that he has are very, very practical and easy to apply. Develop a better understanding of the whys and hows of life. I think he gives a great background as to many of the influences that come from life, whether it be religion, culture, or society. And I think if you watch some of his videos and read some of his other writings, I think he's developed quite a following, and he's got very compelling ideas and some challenging ideas that really cause you to think. And furthermore, this is a person who's done a lot of thinking, and I think he gives great insight that I have not found anywhere else. The 12 rules are flashed here on the screen. I'm going to walk through each one of them and give some commentary on each. Rule number 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Jordan Peterson uses lobsters for the example, but basically he said humans, like lobsters, exist in hierarchies, and it's a natural construct. That's where he starts this chapter. Humans and lobsters have similarities in their nervous systems, and based on a common ancestor of about 350 million years ago. At that time, that was even before trees began to develop and flourish. Lobsters have a nervous system like humans that is attached to status and uses serotonin. He talks a lot about status and serotonin and what serotonin does to your happiness and to your physical body, especially as it relates to lobsters. So lobsters higher up in the hierarchy produce more serotonin, which produces positive emotions. Lobsters lower in the hierarchy produce less serotonin, which are related to negative emotions. It would be similar to our depression or feelings of happiness. When lobsters are injected with serotonin, they stand up straight. Even if they've been beaten in terms of territorial dominance by another larger lobster or bigger lobster, when they get the serotonin, they actually stand up straight and act more confident. So his guide is to feel more confident and develop a positive emotion. Simply stand up straight. Rule number 2 is to treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. You deserve respect, and you have a vital role to play in the world. you should take care of, help, and be good to yourself in the same way that you would take care of a loved one. A lot of us have examples where we have a pet or another loved one, and we give a lot of energy and a lot of devotion to making sure that we take great care of those. But really, we don't ever stop to take care of ourselves. There's studies that he provides in the chapter where people have been given medicine and they refuse to take it or don't take so they basically neglect themselves, which is kind of the opposite of what people do for someone that you care about. So he ends the chapter with really consider what's truly good for yourself, and I think taking care of yourself is one of those. Also, he starts to also put in here determining where you're going and choosing a destination, because if you have a destination, a goal is a good thing to have and gets us aligned in the right direction in our lives. He also quotes, "He whose life has a why can bear almost anyhow." So again, I think this is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping, but also have a goal and have a destination, because that will help you bear through the tragedies and tough times in life. Rule number 3 is to make friends with people who want the best for you. It sounds like pretty much common sense, but if you surround yourself with people who support your upward aim, they will actually help you achieve your upward aim. People who are not aiming up will do the opposite. They will drag you down. And I think a lot of people have experience with this, and it's advice that you hear quite often. So he advises in this chapter to seek out the good, and it is very true that it's a lot harder than finding the negative. So if you look for positive, it's going to be difficult. Negative tends to creep in, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of those types of thinking or be surrounded by those types of people. So if you aspire upwards and you reveal the inadequacy of the present versus the promise of the future, that's like taking a very objective assessment of where you are in life and where you are going in terms of your goal. And once you realize that, you can set to working to improve your particular situation. So he has some other advice based on some clinical observations, but he said the precondition to desire to improve is really is something that's required for progress. Rule number 4 is a great chapter, and it basically says compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And I think that's really great advice. But in a nutshell, surround yourself with people who support your upward aim. So once you have that goal and once you're trying to strive for something different, surround yourself for people who are going to pull you, to help push you forward and propel you upwards. People who are not aiming up will do the opposite. They will drag you down. It's similar to the advice that people say about crabs in a bucket. Every time an individual crab tries to crawl out of the bucket, a lot of the other crabs will pull them back down in. And those are not the people that you want to surround yourself with. So you want to seek out the good, which is a lot harder than finding the opposite. Negative surrounds us. Just look at the news, listen to people's comments and complaining, and even sometimes your own self-talk. It is a very important fact to try to remain positive despite all of that. So when you aspire upward, you reveal the inadequacy of the present versus the promise of the future. So what he's saying there is, if you set a goal, you can objectively assess where you are today and then come up with a plan to get to a better spot, even if it's just a little bit of a change from where you were the day before. So a little positive improvement is much better on a consistent basis than trying to change yourself wholesale from what you were yesterday. So he said that the desire to improve is the precondition for progress. And that means that you have to want to improve, you have to have that desire before you can make any progress. Rule number 5 is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. These are some really good pieces of advice, especially if you're a parent. I'm a parent, I have 3 children, and I think it's great advice. All of us know that parents know that children will push boundaries. They're testing things. They want to explore the world, and they want to see where those boundaries are. And if you don't tell them where the boundaries are, they will never know. So he gives the advice of knowing how to parent effectively. Parents need to establish the boundaries. So that's how you discipline your child and talk to them and tell them what things are acceptable and what aren't. Parents also act as proxies for the world, albeit in a more caring and safe way. What that means is, instead of having to send your child out there unprepared for the world and how the world will treat them, which is much more harsher and mean than what you would ever do as a parent, you have to help guide them and shape them so that they won't be surprised or hurt or not expecting what the world will deliver them. Also, it's a better way for them to fit into the world and what are the accepted ways to behave. Discipline is a part of the job of the parent. We are not friends. We are friends, but we're more than friends, is what he says. And you have to establish those rules. That's what children are seeking. So children need to be socialized while still very young. So he says that if a child is not socialized properly, then by the age of 4, that will cause all kinds of problems in life later on. So the bottom line is, if children do things that you dislike, you personally, other adults will feel the same way about your children, and the children will miss out on learning. And that's a very big problem for people, because if your child is somehow annoying or does some behavior that's unacceptable, adults will not teach them things, and everybody needs to learn things, especially children. And so his final piece of advice here is, do not allow resentment to build. Correct and teach the child as soon as possible. It's better than waiting. Rule number 6 is set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This is a great piece of advice. The way he explains it is, suffering and tragedy is a part of life. I mean, it's a fact of life. Life is hard. No doubt about that. What we tend to do is blame the world for our circumstances. So he says, don't allow this type of corruption to take over your life. You have a say. You can do something about it. If you're suffering, the first thing he reminds you to do, or recommends you do, is that you clean up your life. And you don't have to do major things. You can start really small. One of his most famous sayings is, clean up your room if you want to change things. So let's start with something small. And let's not let bitterness hold you back. Let's take personal accountability and get on the road to improving the situation. One of his pieces of advice is to stop doing what you know to be wrong. I mean, that's basically stop lying, for instance, or start forming good habits. Stop doing bad things. Start doing the things that you know are going to be better for you. He also says, say only things that make you strong. And I think and not those things that make you weak and ashamed. So those things that make you strong, saying those things that make you strong, are going to change your attitude towards life. Don't play the victim. Don't blame others. Don't blame systems or ideologies. Work on yourself a little bit at a time. Even small habits like making your bed, cleaning up after yourself, are going to form the foundation for things that are bigger later on. And after practicing this concept for a while, your life will become complicated. Rule number 8 is to tell the truth, or at least don't lie. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You tell the truth. He gives an example of being in a psychology, in a hospital with people who have psychological issues, and basically he could have told small fibs and lies to get through a very complicated situation, but he basically did tell the truth, which was something that the other person could accept versus a lie. So it's a great example of telling the truth was better in that situation than not. So he says, see the truth, tell the truth. So look for the truth in things, but also tell the truth, not only to others, but to yourself. So if your life is not what it could be, try telling the truth for a change. Stop telling even small lies, small fibs. And even in complicated situations that life sometimes throws us, like for instance in the psychological ward that he was in when he was first studying to be a clinical psychologist, if we cannot tell the truth, at least don't tell a lie. So it was better in his estimation to at least tell the truth that he could tell versus coming up with an elaborate response to this person. And I think that's a great piece of advice. Rule number 9 is assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. What you don't know is more important than what you do know. he goes on to discuss how he does his work as a clinical psychologist, but genuine conversation for him is exploration, articulation, and strategizing. He then references, I think it's Rogers, who's a psychologist, on how to truly listen, and he gives some techniques in terms of like repeating back in summary form of what is said by the other person. And I've been using that myself, and it's very hard to do that, but it's very enlightening to also do that. So as well, he talks about respecting the personal experience of the person speaking and comparing that with your experience. And if you're learning something, you can expand your understanding. And I think that's a true aim of a real conversation, where you're trying to share and understand the other person's perspective to gain knowledge yourself. So he says that conversation can lead to learning and growing, and the continual search for knowledge is the highest form of wisdom. Rule 10 is be precise in your speech. So in this one, he uses the example of a husband and wife who finds out that there's been cheating going on in the relationship. And I think he relates it to not being clear and not being honest and not being precise in your speech. So all the things that were left unsaid may have led to the situation at the end. And that's a chaotic situation, which is devastating to a family if there's children, and to the husband and wife. And he says that probably it may have been able to avoid that if things that were said early on, especially about the relationship and how the married couple solved problems together, etc. So we must be precise in our aim. So that means developing a want and understanding what your want is. So ignoring things and not addressing them tends to make problems worse and may give rise to resentment, contempt, or other undesirable behavior. So not addressing it actually causes us to go from order to chaos. And that's a bad state. So I think he also gives the example of confronting things when they bother us. And one of the things, the story that he presents is, when a small child said, "Hey, there's a dragon living in our house," and everybody wants to, the mother and father ignore it. So the dragon, every time they ignore it, the dragon grows a little bit bigger. And this goes on and on and on until the dragon gets so big that the house becomes part of the dragon, and the dragon walks off down the street. And it's pretty hard to ignore at this point. But once they start addressing it, hey, yes, there is, where our house used to be is now being occupied by a gigantic dragon. Each time they said the truth, the dragon started to shrink. So the point is, let's confront things when they appear or when they bother us. And so he also said that it's not just wise to use generalizations about what you want in life. You have to really think and speak carefully about and precisely about what it is specifically wrong or what you want. Because then it's a lot easier to go to work about resolving the issue and avoiding the tragedy that is your life. So if you never say anything, don't be surprised at some point if you feel your life was a waste, or you feel like you're spiraling out of control, or you have regrets. And when you do this is how you discover the meaning of your life. Rule number 11 is do not bother children when they are skateboarding. So he talks about in this chapter the kids that skateboard and take risks, and how well-meaning people put those skate blocks on concrete stairs and other things to try to stop that behavior, when really, in reality, it's just children trying to explore and actually get better by taking risks at what they're doing. So he talks about those risk takings and people pushing themselves, and that's really growth. Boys and girls, men and women are different. He also talks about how we're different, and it's not a social construct that we are different in terms of our skills and our approach to life, where we fit into in society, and how we act in society. But it's really related to biology. Women are more status conscious, men are more competitive, and he says that there's biological reasons for that. So we need to allow for behavior that is natural in both genders. So what this does is, if we allow this, it allows for growth of the individual, pushing limits of personal ability, and does not crush the spirit of individuals. So let boys be boys and girls be girls without interference. The last rule is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Life is full of suffering, and that's a tenet from many religions. and he goes to explain some issues that he's dealt with in his clinical practice of people having cancer, and also he talks about his daughter having some issues with arthritis causing a lot of suffering and pain. But he also says that he has a dog and he has a neighbor cat, and he finds great beauty in, though when you look for it, even as just as simple as pet a cat when you encounter it on the street, or pet a dog, there is beauty in life. And even if despite the troubles and despite the suffering and pain that goes along with life, life is still pretty good, but you do have to look for it. Thank you for listening to my review of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I'll leave a link on where you can purchase the book from Amazon, and also to Jordan's YouTube video site.